Let's talk about something we've all experienced. Those animated movies from our childhood. They were secretly teaching us about one of the most complicated things in life, grief. And you probably didn't even realize it. These weren't just stories about good versus evil. They were, for many of us, our very first real look at what it means to lose someone.
So think about it for a second. What's the first one that comes to mind? The first animated movie that actually made you cry? I'm willing to bet that for a whole lot of you, the answer involves a very grumpy old man, a ton of balloons, and a house just overflowing with memories.
Yep, if that's what you were thinking, you are definitely not alone. We are talking, of course, about that legendary opening to Pixar's Up. In just a few minutes, with pretty much no words at all, we see the entire love story of Carl and Ellie. We see their childhood dreams, their life together, and then that quiet, absolutely devastating moment of Ellie's passing. And here's what's so wild about that sequence: its power to just wreck us emotionally. That's not a happy accident. This incredible depiction of loss, which feels so raw and unique, is actually following a very common pattern, a kind of formula that mainstream animation uses to walk us through the experience of grief. You can almost think of it as a playbook. It's something the big animation studios have been using for decades, really. It's this structured way to tell stories about loss, a way to introduce these huge, difficult ideas to kids in a way that's understandable and, in the end, hopeful. So this playbook often kicks off with the how. The cause of death is absolutely crucial. Was it a straight-up murder? Like with Mufasa. That gives us a clear villain to overcome. Or was it an accident? That often leads the hero down a path of guilt and self-blame. Or maybe it was a sacrifice, which leaves behind this powerful legacy that the hero has to live up to. Each one of these sets the story on a totally different emotional track. And that track is paved with some really familiar emotional beats, right? The characters have to work through their sadness, the trauma of what they saw. They wrestle with blaming others or blaming themselves. It's always a story about losing their innocence, and it's very often fueled by this deep, motivating anger. This whole structure doesn't just help the characters, it helps us, the audience, start to make sense of these huge feelings. And this isn't just a niche theme that pops up here and there. It's basically the standard. I mean, how common is it? Well, a 2017 study looked at 57 different Disney and Pixar movies and found that a whopping 84% of them had a death scene. Loss isn't a side plot, it's often the main engine of the story. So, the main idea behind this whole model is that grief is a catalyst. It's not the end of the story, not by a long shot. It's the beginning of the hero's journey. It's what sends characters like Simba or Carl on this grand adventure of self-discovery, which ends with them finding a new purpose. But what happens when a film just decides to throw that entire playbook out the window? Well, that brings us to a film that takes a radically different approach. We have to talk about Studio Ghibli's 1988 masterpiece, Grave of the Fireflies. This movie doesn't give you a playbook for grief. It gives you a gut punch. Okay, so here's the fundamental difference. Where mainstream animation shows grief as this personal journey toward healing and a new beginning, Grave of the Fireflies shows loss as the unavoidable result of a society that has completely failed. It's not about one hero finding their way, it's about what happens when a whole system fails to protect the people who need it most. And what's really shocking is that the director, Isao Takahata, famously said his movie is not an anti-war film. He said it contains absolutely no such message. His goal was something much more specific and honestly, almost more heartbreaking. He wanted to show two children, a brother and sister, who live a failed life due to isolation from society. The tragedy isn't just the war itself, it's that they become disconnected from everyone who could have helped them. This movie offers zero comfort. There's no villain to beat. There's no new purpose to find. There's no healing adventure. Grave of the Fireflies just forces you, the viewer, to sit with the raw, unfiltered reality of loss when there is no path forward, when there is no playbook. So we've got these two completely different models, right? One is a structured, comforting journey. The other is this stark, brutal portrait of irreversible loss. So why are both of these so important, especially in stories that kids are watching? Well, it's because they both work as what we can call grief narratives. It doesn't matter if they're comforting or challenging, these stories become these incredibly important tools. They give a name and a shape to emotions that feel overwhelming. They normalize feeling sad or angry or confused, and they give us a shared language to even begin talking about one of the hardest parts of being human. And this is where the real magic happens. These movies become a blueprint for conversation. Research shows they give adults a framework to talk about death with children. You can start by just acknowledging the sadness on screen. Then you can help name the feelings the characters are going through. And maybe most importantly, you can talk about how they find a way to keep going. And, that brings us right back to where we started. Because even after the most devastating heartbreak, the whole point of those playbook stories is to show us that there is a path forward. Remember the end of Up, when Carl finally flips through the rest of Ellie's scrapbook? He finds that note from her. Thanks for the adventure, now go have a new one. I mean, that's it. That's the ultimate message of the grief playbook. The story isn't about being stuck in the past. It's about honoring that past while finding the courage to see what comes next. So whether it's through a comforting hero's journey or a really tough look at reality, animation gives us our first toolkit for understanding loss. And the real question is, how do these first lessons in heartbreak help us find our own new adventure?